Welcome back. We're going to talk about stacking order and moving things around with layers. Now, if you notice I have the gradient layer visible, let's turn on the moon layer by just clicking the eyeball. You can make it active if you want. Now we see the moon layer. Let's turn on the sun layer. There's the sun. And let's turn on the alarm clock. Now, why is it that the alarm clock, which is considered the top layer, background is the bottom layer, and it goes from top to bottom, okay? How come you can't see the sun? How come you can't see the moon? But the moon's active because the alarm clock is blocking the sun and the moon because they're directly under this. So if I turn the alarm clock off, you can see they're directly under it. Okay? Now wherever there's transparency in each layer, you can see through it. So if I turn off the alarm clock, I can see the moon and the gradient with the sun because there's transparency in the sun layer. There's also transparency in the moon layer. So thus I can see all this. Okay? But with the alarm clock, the only transparency I have is around here, and that's just the gradient. Okay? Now, what's great about layers, you can move things around. So let's take the moon layer, let's grab it and put it in front of the alarm clock. Now the moon is in front of the alarm clock. Well, let's take the sun and move the sun in front of the alarm clock too. Now the sun is in front of the alarm clock, but it's behind the moon. And again, the transparency around the moon allows you to see parts of the sun, parts of the rooster, and the rest will be the gradient. Okay? Now what happens if we let's turn off the visibility of the sun, turn the visibility of the moon, make the alarm clock active. Now let's drag the alarm clock under the gradient. What do you think will happen? Yep, you're right, it's gone. Why? Because the gradient has no transparency. Thus you cannot see the alarm clock. Turn these on, and yes, you can still see the moon, and you still can see the sun, because there's transparency, and you can't see alarm clock. Okay? Now let's talk about the move tool and why is it so important. Anytime you start Photoshop, always press V to have the move tool selected. You want the move tool selected because it's a nice starting feature to have, and in case you don't make any mistakes by accident. Okay, and next thing is let's see here, put the alarm clock above the gradient so we see the alarm clock. And when you drag it, you'll see that it gets dark. You see that border gets dark? That's where it's going to drop. If it's already off and you click Alt, everything goes off and it stays on. Click Alt again and it does the opposite. There you go. Okay, I wanted to make sure I show you that. And let's talk about the Move tool. So the Move tool is, let's make the moon active. To make the moon active, click on Moon. The Move tool is already selected, and move it around. This is the other thing that's great about layers. It allows you to move this layer independent of all the layers. I love it. Okay, we'll put the moon here. Click on the sun layer, and we'll drag the sun. Now be careful, because when you click over here, guess what? You're not clicking on the sun, and you can look in the layers panel and see that the alarm clock is active because of the blue, so you know you're not on the right layer. That will get you a lot, okay? So just be aware of that. The sun's kind of hard to select, but you got to click right there. And when you click it, you know you got it, you can drag it to the top there. Okay? Click here, and you can move the moon if you want. Click on the rooster, and you can move the rooster around. And look, it's behind the sun, it's behind the moon because it's lower in the stack of layers. Okay? Now, what allows me to just click and select? This little thing right here called Auto Select. Auto Select says, hey, wherever my move tool is and I click, I can move the gradient. Oh, I just moved the gradient, so I just made a mistake, right? Well, if you do, press Control Z to move it back. That's always a well-known, or not well-known, that's a good thing to know. Anytime you click something and it has to be precise and you go, oh, I made a mistake, press Control Z to get it back. Another thing you can do is just go to the gradient layer, click this little icon right here, it will lock it. See, it's locked? Now watch what happens when I try to move the gradient. I can't. It's locked. So sometimes you might want to do that too. Okay, so I'm going to click on the rooster and I can move it around. Another thing you can do is show transform controls. Click on this and this will show you what you selected. So when I select the moon, there's my transform controls. It shows me the center point and it's showing me the controls around this layer I selected. There goes the sun. That way you know what you're selecting. But sometimes it can be a little annoying, so I tend to have that off. Unless I really need it, then I'll turn it on, but most of the time I won't. If you don't have auto select on, let's turn it off. You can still move these around because you can select the layers, right? So let's select the moon and we can move the moon. But here's another way. With the move tool selected, you can right click and choose the layer. So I'm going to choose our alarm clock, because you see it's where you select. It doesn't select everything else. It's just like right here. Right click, and right in this point, below it is the alarm clock. Below the alarm clock is a gradient, and below that is a background. Okay, so we're going to choose alarm clock, and we can move it around. Right click here, and I'm going to choose moon, and watch over there in the layers panel. It reflects, and I can move the moon around. So you have two options. With this off, you're going to have to right click and choose it, and then you can move it, or you can go over to the layer and select it. It's up to you. And in the next lesson, I'm going to talk about a couple more things with layers.